All right, so here we are. We're in AI implications for the commercial tech stack. And it's going to be a panel format, right? So I've got some questions in this little device for these guys, and then you all will have questions as well. Has anybody in this room heard of artificial intelligence? All right, if you haven't, then you're going to learn a lot today. Okay, I'm going to let our three esteemed panelists introduce themselves rather than me reading a bio. So we'll start with Seamus.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name's Seamus Reese-Earl. I'm the Managing Director of RevOps and RevTech here at SBI. Before joining SBI, I founded and ran a firm called Carabiner Group that was one of the first RevOps as a service firms. And so sort of pushing that technology boundary forward over the last 5 years or so. And I got to work with both of these fine, esteemed gentlemen as part of that journey. My background is in Salesforce and then evolved into the broader go-to-market tech stack as we go. And these days, I primarily serve as sort of a go-to-market advisor. But about 25% of my week, when you go and you add up all the hours, is evaluating new AI tech stack components and or evolving products that we've worked with in the past that are unrecognizable to what they used to be.
Very good. Hey folks, Brad Smith, Head of Solution Architecture at Zapier. I'm going to get one thing very clear right now because I get this question more than anything. How do you pronounce the company name? I've gone all the way from Zapier for the Canadians, Zapier in here, or French folks. Oh. It is Zapier, and the easiest way to remember it, Wade had to pound this into my head. We build Zaps. We don't build Zapes. We don't build Zapiers. We build Zaps. So you'll hear me say Zapier. I hope that makes sense. But Seamus already said this, but I've known him for a while. Prior to joining Zapier, which was only 4 weeks ago, which might be alarming to a lot of people. There's a reason why I'm still here, I promise. Prior to doing that, started a business here in Atlanta called Sonar Software. Still very well up and running. We recently pivoted to security. I love security. I hope I'm not going to offend any security people in here. I love go-to-market systems and automating tech better than security, which is why I turned that business over to my co-founder. He's running it very well right now. Similar to Seamus, my whole background has mostly been centered around the Salesforce ecosystem. Cut my teeth in it a decade plus ago here in Atlanta with a company called Cloud Sherpas. Ended up getting acquired by Accenture. Ran internal operations for both Series A through Series C companies, as well as doing some Salesforce consulting on the side. So all things business systems connectivity has been in my wheelhouse, which is why I landed at Zapier with Wade and the team over there. I think the cool part about that is it is still enlightening to me, still 4 weeks in, at the level of AI sophistication and literacy that we have, but also that the market might not have or might still be trying to get to. Better said, if you don't feel, like Brian said earlier, if you haven't heard of AI, that might be alarming. If you don't feel like you're an expert at it, that is perfectly fine. I would be shocked if anybody really raised their hand right now and said, I know everything AI, I'm going to be the master of this or primary person for it. By the time this session's over, something new has come out, so it's almost impossible to be that way. Sure. So we'll talk about how to stay with the trends, but very AI forward now and excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey y'all, I'm Will Allred. I'm one of the founders at a company called Lavender. We help sales teams get as much pipeline as possible from email. And so my background, I've been building AI software since 2018, before OpenAI made it cool. Doing like marketing segmentation, came into the world of email at the start of COVID. We've since then had tens of thousands of folks actively using our Copilot. We've analyzed billions of sales emails. As a byproduct, I've posted a lot of interesting insight that comes out of that on my LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is given me some badge of honor of top sales voice. But right now it's all systems go on our new agentic product, Aura, and learning the ropes with, I think, the best of them when it comes to AI. The idea that anyone's an expert is, I think, a really good place to just find being humble.
All right, good panel, lots of good background. So we're going to cover 4 general topic areas here, and then maybe the audience will take us into different spaces as well. But the 4 things we're going to get into: what does AI mean for RevOps? Then we'll expand that out into the broader go-to-market organization. Then we're going to talk about AI as part of the product itself and what that means commercially, and as well as kind of operationally. And then finally, we'll get a little bit of perspective from people who are in the weeds here on where are things going next and what can we expect across the next 6 months, 12 months, and 36 months when it comes to AI and go-to-market. So that's where we'll go here. We'll start with AI and RevOps. So Seamus, I'm going to start with you. When you think about from when you started Carabiner, as I remember, during the kind of the height of COVID-19, to now, 5 years later, how has AI changed the way that RevOps gets executed? What have you seen as kind of maybe the couple of bigger changes you've across that time period?
I think one of the prevailing topics in RevOps consistently over the last 5 or 10 years has been how to elevate the function to a strategic mandate rather than a tactical one, right? Sales ops has been around for a long time. Biz ops has been around for a long time. This sentiment of revenue operations sitting at this nexus, it's a great idea, but in practice, so very often it's relegated to a couple of Salesforce administrators and an under-resourced team being forced to scramble and be very reactive. I think the interesting thing about the AI boom is that every executive is hearing about it from their peers. They are being pushed to embrace it. They're jumping all the way to the end vision without really understanding how it works. And then the people they're looking to in order to execute against that vision and really be the guide through the minefield of what this thing is and the true paradigm shift that it represents in the industry are the RevOps folks, right? It's this function. So basically, for the last 5 or 10 years, we've been complaining or advocating for getting the seat at the table. And now, in the matter of, I'd argue, the last 3 months even, I don't even know that it extends even that much further than that, RevOps is very truly being empowered or potentially not empowered, but still being looked to go and execute against this. How do we use AI in our organization to stay ahead of the curve, both on a product side, which is brand new, right? RevOps being in a seat to influence product roadmap, and on a tactical execution layer. And so, we've been wanting it for a long time, and our moment in the sun is finally here. I think the real question is, how do we then take that mandate and execute against it?
A follow-up for you, and then Will and Brad, I want any thoughts that you have as well. But do you see that as, at first I heard that as the CEO is coming to RevOps. Is the CEO coming to RevOps with these questions? Or is the CEO maybe going to the CRO or to someone else and saying, what are we doing about AI here? And then, the conversation is happening without RevOps. How often do you see that happening?
I think the answer to that question depends on how long it's taking to achieve whatever the mandate is. So if the CEO says, I want this to happen, and delegates it to the CRO, then the question becomes, all right, what's the progress? How much traction are we making here? And that's the point where you typically see a CEO go around. But to your point, the role of RevOps is elevated dramatically within our own sales product. We have a new stage dedicated to making sure that you have a conversation with a RevOps person on that team, because at the end of the day, if you don't, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. And so I think that point you made of how does the role get elevated? I think AI is a critical piece of the puzzle, because there's so much workflowing and tooling that is now possible through a single person that hasn't been possible in the past because it's required human labor, human capital.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the mandate part is interesting. Even in the short few weeks of being at Zapier, it's every day is a conversation like that. Hey, I was at a conference like this, or hey, our board just had a meeting and we have to be agentic. We have to adopt this. We have to start getting this. And zero shade at that sort of mandate, but it is vague, quite opaque. It's really hard to get into what does that actually mean for our business? What are we trying to solve with that? And it does get passed down. It goes from executives or boards to executives, executives to middle management. And it gets its way all the way down to where RevOps is, regardless of where they are with a seat at the table or not. The interesting part for me is that we're not in a Will Smith movie yet. We're not looking at robots as if they have emotions and they're making their true decisions for us. We're not regenerative AI yet. We will get there scary quickly, I think. But right now, there is still a product owner for this, and it's sitting on the RevOps table. Because as we think about RevOps holistically, there's this massive umbrella. We're taking care. And I say we collectively. I brought my entire background up a second ago. I was RevOps owner, manager, insert title here, for a very long time. When you have all the responsibility to take these intakes in from every business department, make sure they're going to work well with each other, that's that foundation that Seamus did such a great job with Carabiner Group, same thing with Will on all things Lavender. That is still a lot of onus to put on somebody, and there's still ownership there. I would encourage anybody, if you take anything back to your RevOps teams, encourage them to be product owners of it, not experts of it, but be product owners of AI and making sure that's going to work for the whole business. If I was still in that role functionally, I would be wildly excited to sit in it for a long time and become that primary owner of it. It's only going to elevate careers more, but it's a top-down mandate, and it's really, really tough. We'll get into more of that to execute on.
I think the piece that we often, like the CEOs are in the conversation and they're setting the mandate. They may be doing it in consultation with the CRO or the CFO or the CMO or COO, everyone. Like I was in one last Monday, an in-person workshop in Austin. 130 million headed to 300 in a year is kind of the goal, right? And not a bad place to be. Business is doing great. You have the CRO, CFO, Chief People Officer, new head of Americas, all in a room trying to grapple with this stuff and figure out what the heck is, CEO is a product guy, right? So he's in another room doing the other stuff. But the really interesting part is that with everything else that RevOps get asked for, I think, and I'm curious to hear y'all's perspective, but with everything else RevOps gets asked for, there is a baseline level of literacy that we expect for the CEO or CRO or whoever is asking for it, that they basically understand the mandate of like, hey, we're trying to do dashboarding or reporting and analytics or whatever it might be, get some metrics for the board decks. Like for a pretty long time, we know kind of, they don't necessarily know how the sausage is made, but they know what a sausage looks like and the various different steps of this. AI, the knowledge gap is just astounding, right? The CEO is hearing anecdotal stories of, oh, we did this, we did that, but there isn't even a place to go look for it, right? I was at a dinner in San Francisco the other day, and we're talking about, well, how do you stay up to date on AI? And the consensus table, people back from A16Z to Sequoia, these are top operators in the AI landscape. They look at Twitter every hour. I'm not, legitimately, everybody said, okay, yeah, we've got the alerts set up on Twitter because that's where we're getting our news from. And they're going to, on average, 2 weekly dinner groups every week. And they have dinners together and they talk about what the evolution is. Like, there's no way that the CEO has that knowledge. And so they're snapping their fingers and they're saying, hey, RevOps people, you don't need any more budget. You don't need any more tools. We're hearing all of this consolidation stuff is possible. Expect it done by July 1st, good luck with that. And they're not doing it out of malice. It's all that they're hearing about is the success. They're not hearing about the process and how to get there. And that's where the guide needs to come in.
Can I add to that? Because I feel like one of the things that you started to touch on, and it shows up interestingly in sales processes for me, which is somebody at a VP of sales type role, a VP of sales development, comes in, brings the product in, and then RevOps is completely surprised. Oh, we're looking at this now. Great. Let me add that to the 7,000 things that I'm looking at, and let me figure out where this fits in, right? And so as part of that larger discussion of how do you bring RevOps higher up the table, I think these evaluations and discussions have to run through RevOps because they're the ones who ultimately implement it. It's we forgot how change management works. It's AI. Change management went out the window. AI is going to do it.
Yeah. So let me build on this a little bit. One of the things I've been actually surprised to see this, maybe I shouldn't have been, but when we've just had conversations with RevOps leaders and really just cross go-to-market, and we've asked them what are your priorities, what are you really focused on right now? The thing we hear a lot Seamus, you've seen this, is I'm just evaluating my tech stack right now. Like, how do I audit my tech stack? How do I understand, what should be in there, what shouldn't, especially given all the new tools that are out there? And so the question that I have for you all is, as you think about this notion of the number of solutions that are out there is proliferating that I could potentially have, the number of features that my existing solutions have are also proliferating, right? And so I don't know if I actually have the thing that the other guy is telling me that I need. I might already have it in this other thing that I have. So maybe if you had a couple of criteria or questions that people should be asking as they're evaluating all of these different resources that are out there against the tech stack that they already have in place, and then maybe even how they're evaluating, how they think about the questions they should ask of their own existing tech stacks as they're in place now.
Well, I want to throw it to Will in a second because they're going through an interesting transition point on this. But three data points that I think are interesting when it comes to this trend. So first is AI first versus AI native. If you ever looked at the search term frequency for AI first and AI native over the last 6 months, you see a spike.
What does it mean?
It's pretty impossible to go and build an AI first or AI native product shift in 3 to 6 months, which is effectively what everyone is doing from an existing tech stack perspective. Will is going through that journey right now, which is why I want to throw it to you here in a second, of like telling us what does that actually mean from a rebuild the product from the ground up motion, because that's what it takes to be an AI native tool solution. But the other piece that I think is really fascinating is this sentiment that the tech stack is consolidating or expanding, right? Like, we're seeing strategic decisions being made by major players in the market that AI is the direction. Great, we're all on that same page. But we have to remember that for the last 18 months, everyone was going down the platform play, right? And saying, okay, we're going to build all of these little feature sets so that we can consolidate our tech stack. But the AI components weren't at a position yet to actually make it AI first. So they became platforms, but they're not AI first platforms. And at the same exact time, we're seeing hundreds, and I mean hundreds, get founded and funded and develop nearly identical products with no real technology moat outside of brand and distribution. And so, we just did a study for Vista on the AI SDR, craze, which is, pretty hard if you really, if you search up AI SDR, there's a couple dozen of them, maybe more, actually, now that I say that. Lavender scored pretty well. I'll just give them the little bump on the study. But what we were effectively finding is that buyers, in particular, had no idea how to evaluate these tools, right? And then even the buyers, the decision makers, when they went to RevOps, all of this stuff was happening so quickly that when you went and asked for examples of how it was implemented successfully before, or case studies, or best practices, or what have you, the biggest gap at these companies, professional services.
Yep.
No one had they were too early. They hadn't reached a scale to even build the in-house SMEs, which is fascinating in and of itself, because how are you going to go and execute it?
Yeah. I'm going to pass it to you in 2 seconds. I think this is one funny thing. We were talking about this in the back, kind of prepping for this. Being a venture-backed business prior to joining Zapier, we had Salesforce, Craft Ventures, Parade, a lot of folks at the table with us. And I remember vividly when OpenAI, the craze starts happening, and then that just starts to permeate and propagate. And I remember sitting in a board meeting one time, like, Sonar, what are we doing for AI? What are we doing for that? Like, that's kind of that same blind mandate of like, hey, go use AI, go use the new toy, it's shiny. It's like, well, we can certainly implement something, and we did it really quickly. We did it within 3 sprints, and we had it out in GA, and we were using GPT 4.0 on the prompt to come back into our platform and start doing that. The reason I bring that up, everybody's barrier of entry to putting AI into their platforms was drastically lowered by giving AI, or giving those APIs calls over to OpenAI or Claude, or pick your poison or pick your flavor. What that rendered now, 365 days, maybe 2 years later, every platform that you have in your tech stack has AI into it. So now you're getting these questions of, I've got this problem, I'm squinting and seeing what the outcome could look like or what I expect, but how this sausage is made in the middle and which platform to use, do I use Gongs, do I use Lavenders, I don't know, they all have a flavor. How am I supposed to leverage all these cohesively in this journey?
I'll let you answer that one now. So, yeah, I think this is interesting question because we've got a group of folks who are dealing with this right now, right? Which is when I think about the existing tech platforms, the existing tech stack, and the very intentional decision we made to effectively take our core IP and rebuild an entirely new house around it, which is we've analyzed billions of sales emails. We know why email works based on who you're talking to, why you're talking to them. But now taking that system and instead of coaching, going into, okay, we go do it for you, right? And so we're in a world where we partner really well with the folks at SalesLoft right across the skyline there, right? Like Gong, et cetera. And so we've got great relationships with these companies, and I'm seeing how these folks are coming to market with a really interesting AI capability, right? There's nothing wrong with like both of us having AI capability. There's nothing wrong with like that function. It's just one company has like a core sole focus that is we're going to generate the best content possible. And so what I've seen is, yes, it's really easy. There's a low barrier entry to like add, hey, insert prompt here, generate content there. But what you get from a quality standpoint is sometimes not exactly what you want. And it's very much so in the hands of the user to generate what you want. And so like one of the things in thinking about like coming into this, like what's the top skill that you could gain as you think about like tackling AI? Being able to prompt well. Sam Altman was on a panel a couple days ago. This is how fast this stuff moves. He's sharing data on how people go and use ChatGPT. Older generation treats it like Google. Younger generation effectively like onboards their entire life into this AI system and has their own personal GPT, right? And that's the future that we're going down. And so like learning how to prompt the system, learning how to teach the system to be like your like second brain is like functionally where we are heading. And so how that will impact those really lightweight prompt layers, which like some workflows, it totally makes sense to have like something lightweight, right? An inbound lead comes in, you've got a chatbot on the website. That chatbot just needs, your knowledge repository to be able to respond and answer questions, right? It doesn't require anything like functionally crazy. Doing cold outbound, on the other hand, I'm sure everyone here has gotten a cold email from an AI SDR at some point, and I can pretty much guarantee you probably haven't responded to it because what those things look like are really, really thin prompt layers of like, hey, it's on you. Good luck knowing how to prompt the system to write a good email, right? And so I think there's, at these platform layers, it makes total sense to have these like really thin, just interconnecting like layers, but at the endpoints where you start to really need subject matter expertise, that's where you're gonna find that those platforms are gonna struggle with very particular use cases.
So what I heard was, I was trying to distill this into a question I can ask when I'm looking at my tech stack. And Will, what I think I just heard you say was, does it do what I need it to do?
Yeah, good enough.
Good enough, yeah. So maybe we go down the line and think about, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at what I've got, right? And I'm going to look at what I've been looking at. I'll give you at most two questions that I should ask as I'm looking at the stack to help me know whether or not I've got what I need or need to start looking elsewhere, or if the thing that I'm looking at is the thing that I need.
All right, one basic and one slightly more advanced. Basic is, do you even have a list of all of the tools with the contract terms and the usage data of what you're actually using? Like, mind-boggling, right? Just doing that exercise, when we looked at over the last year of doing that exercise, 10 to 15% per customer on the tool budget saved just by doing that exercise. Wild, right? Okay, again, right? These are $20 to $30 million a year tech budgets, right? These are not, you want to have a nice performance review. Oh yeah, I cut $3 million just by cutting the shelfware, right? Salesforce isn't going to be happy with you. All these other vendors are not going to be happy that you're not going up for renewal. But that's step one, is even just understanding what the heck is you're paying for and what your teams are using is piece one. Piece two is a slightly different frame, right? If we actually consider this as a paradigm shift of a moment in the way we work and the way we run our businesses, I think we can look at the problem statements that the tools themselves are solving for, look at their brand positioning and look at their messaging, and be able to tell, are they truly AI-centric, right, in an agentic way, and are they solving the problem in a way that AI is actually intended for, or is it just a conversion layer that gets put on top, right? And I'm trying to think of a metaphor or an example or something that I can throw out there, and I think it's the one I'm landing on closest enough, and it's the first time I'm using this, so bear with me. But it's like the concept of building a house, right? For a very very long time, you hire a builder, an architect, a contractor, there's a pretty distinct way of building a house. And that's great, and you could call it in a whole bunch of different ways of branding, but there's also now a way where you go and buy a pre-built house and it just lands and it works already, right? And like that type of a paradigm shift, that type of it being totally different and yet solving the same problem theoretically, is exactly how the ones that are truly AI first are approaching problem solution, in that these are problems that probably weren't solvable before, right? Like in a lot of these instances. And so if you're talking about the problems and you're looking at the solutions, and it isn't truly revolutionary, like it doesn't itch that back of your brain of like, wow, this is different. I believe this is like, it's not actually resonating. Either they've got terrible marketing and terrible brand, which I think is the baseline right now for the tools that are succeeding, or it's just not there yet.
Yeah, short answer and long answer for both of those. I don't know, I look at this probably in the over-optimistic lens, but what a time to be alive for a RevOps person to go and engage this. I know I said that earlier, but I think truly, if you're not already thinking with your RevOps cap on, what problem do I have and what am I trying to solve? You've already kind of messed up the technology side of things. And I know that sounds cliche. Let's don't worry about having technology fix something. Let's just figure out what our biggest problems are and go tackle them. Take that first step though, because you can get lost in the cloud of, all pun intended, of noise. We talk a lot about signal to noise ratio, and right now, sadly, there's so much noise in the market because everybody's implementing some new AI flavor or solving some new agentic problem. And I think sometimes that spotlight focus gets off of the internal side of things. Hey, instead of me going to a conference and hearing how quickly I can get something done, kind of look back at what we said our problems are for H1 or H2, whichever we're in, and make sure that we're actually staying true north to solving those. The second piece of this, and I don't think this gets done nearly enough, and I can reflect on it from my Sonar days, my early days right now at Zapier. I don't think customers right now, and by customers I mean your internal RevOps teams, are leveraging their customer success managers correctly, their technical account managers correctly, their solution architect team correctly. Put the onus on them. You've already spent a ton of money on products like Zapier or Lavender or anybody else. And I think there's times that we kind of put our cowboy hat on and we go off into the Wild West of, I can Google this or I can throw it in ChatGPT and figure out how to solve it. You have subject matter expertise at your fingertips. They're an email or a Slack or a Teams message away. Leverage them. And we're doing that a lot right now. The AI literacy is our term right now that we're using so much internally. And we'll get off calls with customers and we'll grade them. Like, F-, if it could go lower, we could go lower. B+, they actually have a little bit going on there. But it's not to throw shade at the literacy side of things. This is all new. As a random question, has anybody heard of MCP or starting to use that in their daily practice? I know you guys know how to do that. Is that a foreign acronym to a lot of people? Cool. Anthropic just came out with it in November. So if you feel like you're behind the curve, you're 6 months maybe.
It just happened.
Yeah, it literally just happened, yeah.
But Model Control Protocol, that's what MCP stands for. Don't feel like you have to Google it right now. Happy to talk to you about it. But it just shows you how quickly all this stuff is changing, and it can be a little bit of noise inside of it. Go back to your roots. What problem do we have? How do I go and engage my tech stack? I'm not going to make decisions for you. Use this system, not that one. I would let the vendors do their jobs and help me understand how I can use this the best. It just goes so much unused.
Before we go, I just Brad does his homework, which is one of the things I love about him. He comes with printouts sometimes, right? You got him there? So here, let me just.
Which one do you want?
This one. This one. All right. So he.
Oh, you got that's
there we
the
go.
one you
This
want.
one. All right. So we're talking prepping for this, and like from a very tactical element. The title of this table here, Existing Revenue Operations AI Zapier Use Cases, is at the top of this page. And there is a table that goes status, customer journey stage, details, impact, and use case category. And then you go down into subcategories of customer acquisition. Here are the 4 things that we can use AI for to accomplish this specific, strategic output. This is an exercise that requires an awful lot of coordination and a lot of different stakeholders, and I don't want to trivialize it, but it's also a table on a piece of paper, and it's our jobs in this room to facilitate the putting together of this table. And this alone is a shockingly missed step. Maybe not missed, but just that's one of those first steps that you don't need any extra budget or
Shane, before you put that away, tell us the rows again.
Oh yeah, across the top, status, customer journey stage, details, impact, and use case category. And I'll be the first to tell you, 4 weeks in, I did not create this. High five to Lindsay Roethlisberger, our director of RevOps. But her team, her and Diane and Sarah put all this together, and happy to share this. We can all look at this later. But it's interesting to me because they categorize the problems first, what we're going to try to solve with it. When you think we have a tech stack, we integrate with 8,000 different systems. We have a copy of that. There's no shortage of tech we can use, but we go and try to find the problem first and figure out how to actually evolve into it. It's a fascinating way to approach the problem. Kudos to Lindsay and her team for building this.
I think there's actually a really interesting, this is probably why folks feel like we're flying by the seat of our pants when it comes to evaluating AI tools. I see this from the vendor side of the house. So I have to coach my reps on disqualify over qualify folks in, because you get so many people kicking tires and just trying to explore and learn, right? Which is a good thing. I think when you look at business fundamentals, back to your point, it's, hey, what problem are we trying to solve? What's the KPI that we are trying to move the needle on? I think what's, going further back to what you're CEOs hearing anecdotal stuff, right? It's oh, well, if they could do this, we could do this, right? Anecdotally, we got rid of our entire support team and now it's AI, right? Those are things that we can do, but the question is how much does that cost you? What's the opportunity cost? When I think about it, it's there's probably big problems that you need to go solve that are fundamentally moving the business. I think what's interesting with AI is it opens up this opportunity to say, okay, well, what if we could do this thing? No, it's not our hair on fire problem. The business is going to continue to function just fine, but it'd be pretty cool.
Anybody here have questions for the group? We're kind of about a little bit, we've got about 10 or so minutes left. So if there are any questions that you all have for the group, then now would be a good time. Yeah.
So I really liked what you said about subject matter expertise, because that's something I've been seeing. Everything's bland until we can put some of our top secret stuff that is not on our website. It's locked away, some of it in the heads of people that I'd like to extract. But yeah, we've got stuff like that. But are you seeing a challenge in the marketplace with all these tools? They really want to own everything themselves and not talk to each other. And I can see a perfect world where I've got a data set, all of my core data. I'm a data warehouse vendor, so I've got a really good data warehouse. Mm-hmm. And then I've got all this lovely extra IP. I want to be able to plug in AI and other solutions on that. What I don't want is all my secret sauce going off to them and staying there, and the stuff they do being a net benefit to them or just lost. I want to bring it back to me. Do you see we're going to get towards that, or is it going to be, I'm going to have a bunch of people who want to be the platform, and I'm going to have great at one thing, crappy at others, and I can't really move things around?
So I think MCP makes a lot of this has to happen. Yes. Because MCP, the protocol, allows models to talk to each other. I can tell you from a vendor standpoint, I don't really want your data mixing in with other people's data. That doesn't help anybody. It just increases the likelihood that we have an egg on our face and like, somebody else's like AI SDRs pitching the wrong product. So like, we don't approach it that way. But like, there's core aspects that come from like a communal energy, like learning, interesting instructions that people have given our agent. Like somebody turned it into an account manager the other day, and I was like, didn't know it could do that. That's pretty cool. But on the like your point that you're making, where it's like a data warehouse that can just be communicated with, I think that's an inevitable future.
I think we're tiptoeing really close to an environment where an MCP is going to be the first step into this. We're not far away from the Will Smith movie where agents are talking to agents. Again, we'll keep their emotions to the side of it, no spoiler alerts for that old movie. But that is going to be something that inevitably we're going to be tackling. If I really had to guess, we might see it later this year. I would hope that we have a little bit more time to figure out how to really corral it in. But so much of this goes down to the data side and access to data. A lot of folks I assume in here are Salesforce. Maybe I have some HubSpot CRM folks, I don't know. But for the most part, a lot of people treat Salesforce as their data repository. We might still hook it up to a database to really pump stuff back and forth. But if you think about the access to data, MCP is going to be the first step to this because it is going to put it in an encrypted manner to where I can go and access this data, I can anonymize it, encrypt it, make sure that another LLM that I don't know about or a sub-processor that might be in a different country or state is, even if they have access to that data, is still going to be in a place that's secure and allowed. But BJ brought this up earlier at the keynote. I feel bad for anybody going through a lot of technical security reviews. My team owns that at Zapier. We use agents to help fill that out because that is a long-ass spreadsheet, and it's not fun to go question by question, all that. So we're doing it fast and efficient, but they are getting longer and bigger, and it's elongating deal cycles, and it's got a business impact at the end of the day. But there's no shortage right now of focus on data security. Told you we pivoted my old business to a security model. If you want Sonar, I'm happy to pitch that one too. But that is a big place where it's all going. How do we know these systems are connecting? How do we know what the downstream impacts and data processing, sub-processing, and what models are going into? It's a real thing, and it's sweaty palm syndrome when you start talking to a CISO or InfoSec person.
I'm going to take a slightly alternate tack to this, which is that I don't think anybody that I've been speaking to from a vendor perspective cares about sort of the interaction with the other vendors. They're not being stingy. They know they have to play as a part of an ecosystem. They're building it into the roadmaps. How do we plug in API, all of this. And MCP is that step of getting there from now we've talked about it for enough time. Y'all are gonna go Google it, but it is that first step down the highway. What I will say though, which I think is interesting, iPhone was released in 2008, I think, if memory serves correctly. And for 15 years or so, 20 years or so now, Apple has made built their fortunes certainly on the, you look at stock price pre and post. Yes, there's a hardware component. The piece that gets missed is the App Store component and the data that got shared, basically, right? Those very long terms and conditions that we all signed absolutely changed the name of that industry in a way that, I don't think was really, that wasn't what Jobs was talking about on the keynote stage, right? The widescreen touch, iPod with touchscreen controls was great, but what really changed was the whole game around data. And I think my opinion on this is that despite the, lengthy security reviews and so on, your competitors are probably going to agree to it. That DPA, depending on who blinks, right? Does the vendor blink or does the client blink and sign up for it? The reality is that one of your competitors is probably going to agree to those terms and get access to truly paradigm shifting technology, right? Like we were talking with the second largest firm that specializes in pulling out copper piping and asbestos materials from old buildings. And for a very long time, they were never able to understand and access the layers of data in order to identify the ICP that is perfect for their business, right? There are 17 floors in this building and so on and so forth, because it lived in so many different databases. And it would be a 15-minute, 30-minute process to research every property to figure it out. Now, you have a team of agents going out there and researching and pulling all of the different data points, mapping the routes. That is a paradigm shifting moment. And if they don't choose to sign over their data to this, their competitors will. One of them will, and the game is over from that point forward, right? And so I think it's it is a question,
Yeah.
but it's also to a certain degree a non-question as well. Like, you got to embrace this stuff. So unless there's legislation that comes through, which is one of those back-end moments that could end up happening, I think we're in for an interesting ride over the next couple of years.
Other questions from the group?
I can add a little layer to that too, which is like the whole your competitors will. So like selling in this space, yeah, you get so many tire kicking inbounds of like, hey, I want to explore use case, understand. The flip side of that is once I know that there's a use case in this industry for X, you better believe I'm going to spin up an agent to go outbound and go find some other people who have that exact same thing, right? And so to your point, like that is 100% true.
You just brought up an interesting point, and it's the fear driver, depending on the size of the company. Yeah. You brought up an interesting point. It's an opportunity, but it's also a serious threat. And if, like many of us, depending on the size of the company, and they don't move fast enough, they're hesitant to embrace technology. It's got to go through 8,000 layers of approval. Well, we as leaders are trying to drive that organization to move faster. And I can tell you what, if I sit in front of the IT guy who's holding us back and say, look, our competitor's going to sign and we're out of business, they're going to move a hell of a lot faster. So I think that's an interesting point to leverage the threat aspect of this to get things moving.
I think I'm going to probably butcher this Sam Altman quote because it is so old now. But he uses a really good reference to this, and he usually answers this question or gives this response in the question of, how do I future-proof myself from getting replaced by a bot? Which is kind of a real thing. We've talked about SDR.
It's like I have no
piece
idea.
of it. And I don't know, he takes a unique perspective. He's like, this isn't the first time we've seen technology make something easier and better for us. We all didn't really get to experience the Industrial Revolution, but we know about it. And at that time, a lot of people were like, oh my God, we've got machines now, they're gonna move this stuff. I don't have to pick this rock up. I'm obsolete. I thought my job was to move the rock from point A to point B. Nah, use this new tool that helps you move that, don't break your back. But where it becomes dog eat dog, and I think where it becomes competitive in the landscape of vendor A versus vendor B, if you don't embrace it, you will get your lunch eaten quickly. And so same way you will get replaced for moving that rock. We will use a machine to move the rock from point A to point B. Unless you're stuck in the Flintstones, you're not gonna be used anymore. However, if you use that new technology, use it to your best ability, embrace it, run right into it and start taking advantage of it, you're gonna be so much better off, and you're not gonna find yourself in peril of losing your job. Competitive-wise, we take a little bit of a different spin to this, because maybe I'm not gonna call it a use case or a unique case. We have 8,000 plus integrations. We integrate with our competitors. So we are an iPaaS platform. We also integrate with Boomi and Celigo and Workato and Tray and insert names here. I would encourage a lot of vendors to look at that landscape and almost take it as a rising tides mentality versus how does SalesLoft over here go displace outreach by doing X? Not to say they shouldn't, we're all competitive, myself included. But if you're not at least squinting and seeing how we can all work together with this and make it actually work, the cool part about us internally running these businesses, we can use our tech stack. Now, it's not lost on me that a lot of us run businesses around here that do have competitors, and so we have to put two different hats on to think about it. But it's hard for me to squint into a world where it's gonna be one de facto AI agent or one de facto system. It's only gonna get bigger, and so we kind of have to learn how to play in this sandbox together.
One pretty tactical element, though, I think that RevOps can jump in on this stuff is, I think your competitor landscapes, if I had to place if I had to place a lot of money on something, it's that your competitor landscapes for every business in this room is probably going to shift dramatically over the next 5 years. Yep. And that's just looking at the venture money that's flowing in, right? Like, we're seeing very, very large checks being written by blue chip funds into category disrupting businesses with proven operators. Like, this is, they're giving them $100 million pre-seeds to seed rounds to say, this business where there's a bunch of category leaders, the bet they're making is that you all are not going to be able to move fast enough and pivot quickly enough to defend against the nimble guys who are operating in startup mode. instead of scale-up mode. And so I think there's something to be said for the RevOps team. Probably didn't have that mandate before of saying, hey, competitive landscape-wise, we're seeing an awful lot of closed-lost reasons from a company we've never heard of before. And they're gaining traction on us at an exponential pace that we need to start paying attention to.
It's true.
Like, to me, what I see, I can't say I know AI that well, but how do you get your legal department to sign off on using these AI tools, right? Because I think there's a loss of IP that's coming. I mean, there's this big lawsuit the New York Times has filed, right, against Microsoft and OpenAI for using their old newspapers, you know, those articles and stuff. So I think it's like, yeah, we want to use this to give ourselves an advantage, but let's just make sure we're not feeding those large language models and somebody can take our good idea, right? So I think that, to me, I see as it's an old school barrier, right? Legal says no, right?
Yeah.
So.
I'll tell you a very funny story about that. This was 2 years ago, right when the peak of all of it booming, right? I asked my wife that. She's a partner in a law firm in that building right over there, which also in the legal community, you talk about adopting technology. They are still in the Flintstone age. I asked her this, like, how is your group, how is your law firm thinking about that? We're like, we are salivating over it. Please. And she was in the more camp of like, please keep going to use these models to go build your business and send me that contract when you used it naively and now you're getting screwed on it. I'll be the person that actually backstops that and helps it. That was their mentality a couple of years ago. I kid you not, we share a ChatGPT account, a personal account. She uses it more than I do now. So she's even gotten comfortable with it. From a, how do I get my legal team on board with it? I wish I could tell you it's binary. It's more of getting to a level of comfort, then I will be super comfortable with this. I can reflect, we had a call, this was our 4th or 5th customer, this is back in my Sonar days. I had to get on with the CISO of App Dynamics, now being a Cisco entity. And he told us at the very beginning of this 30-minute call, he's like, we're not gonna get to the end of this and I'm gonna be fully on board with how you process our data and how you actually use our tool. Our job for this next 30 minutes is for you to tell me how I get comfortable with some of the gaps in your security side of things, how you're processing data. And that's from the CISO of now Cisco. So I think it's a comfort level. It's not a 1 or a 0. It's how do you get your legal team on board with it. You can also increase your cyber liability if you want. That's a good one to do. We did that, and I think there's a lot of companies that are looking to de-risk that piece of it, but unfortunately there's no slam dunk to go into legal department.
But risk is the key foundation,
mitigation.
right? And that, like, there are low risk and there are high risk elements to this, right? There are low risk ways to say, hey, we've got a rec open for X, Y, and Z. You know, I would add a column to the table we were talking about before, right? We're trying to solve this problem, the solution, put together the proposed solution, and then say, okay, you know, doomsday scenario, what can happen, right? And like literally get into the head of like, okay, where are the gaps? What are the exposure points? Because there are those applications that are less so. I think AI SDRing is actually one of those areas where, as long as you're operating outside of GDPR components, right, still the risk that needs to be set aside, right? But we also got to be able to crawl, walk, run element, you know, some of this too. And that's one way where we can say, okay, what's the least risky, but also still very tied to business outcome opportunity that we can say, okay, this is our first step off the pier. Let's all take it together and link arms, knowing that, you know, we've mitigated the risks however we can.
My top question, I have these like legal security reviews I'll hop in on. And the easiest question to ask, like, what are you worried about? Like, what's the risk that like fundamentally you're thinking in the background, but you might not be saying, so that way we can understand whether or not that is a risk or if it was never a risk in the first place, right? Like sharing data and like the risk that my data trains your model. Like the reality is like we would never do that because it would be really easy for our competitor to spin up a like fake account and just feed really bad data into our system. And so we put safeguards in place to prevent model poisoning. And so like it's really simple for us to explain, but I think the key is like, sometimes you have a good seller who knows to ask the question, like, what are you worried about? And then sometimes you have to do a little bit of internal selling yourself because you want the problem solved and be like, hey, well, hold on, time out. What's the big concern here? I find that's a powerful question.
Yeah.
Of the sales tech stack, what do you think gets turned on its head the most with AI? Because like to me, CRM is like the necessary evil of ops, and it always is taking from a rep. Like we always ask them to do something in it for a forecast and obviously a prediction. But how can AI like start giving information to reps through the sales journey, like in the buying process or sales journey, and make it easier for them to sell, like rather than doing all this admin work that never seems to go away?
Yeah. It kind of goes back to data that we were talking about, access to data, not necessarily the technical side of where you're storing it, how you're storing it, who can have access to it. That is an IT and RevOps partnership of how we do that. Good example of that, happy to show it to you in the table later. We have Zap set up to know before a sales rep is going into a call right now, what are the things that they need to know? And this is nothing new. Everybody's been doing this research, like, all right, have they been in the news lately? Do they have a new CEO? Do they take a recent round of funding? My early days of sales, I was doing all that manually, Crunchbase, looking at Zoom info, you name it. We now have an agent that actually does that, and it sends your sales dossier over to the entire team, the solution architect, the AE, their managers, all the way up to Wade. Wade gets CC'd on him, our CEO. He likes to see that. What group are we going into? But that used to be a very manual task. That is predicated completely on what access of data do we have, and it's coming from a lot of places, from our CRM, from our call recordings, from our transcriptions, from the internet. The data points out are endless. What you're using to kind of put it into a box and give it to your team in a succinct way, and I can't stress succinct enough, because you can get data overload all day long, but doing it in a meaningful and succinct way is what is going to be the key to that.
The turning on its head element is interesting, because I don't know that I could give you a really good answer on like, I think the movement is so big and the paradigm element is so hard to get your head around. What I will say is I think everyone will agree on is that the standard for what you're willing to pay for from a SaaS perspective just quadrupled or 10x'd, right? Like the user experience, the way it mirrors your business, the way you interact with the tool itself, right? Aptio, that's the name of it, the CRM one, Aptio, you guys remember that one? Yeah. Like a couple of months ago, maybe half a year ago, right, made big news of like, hey, we're starting the first AI-powered CRM, right? Do I think they're gonna go displace Salesforce? No. If they get to a particular size, they'll get bought, right? Like that's what's gonna end up happening. But like, are we going to really accept that setting up Salesforce now takes, 12 months and $1 million, or like absolutely not, right? Like the bar for what a software platform, what a SaaS tool needs to provide you just got elevated, and the ones who don't evolve are the ones that's where it becomes a category killer, right? More than anything.
I would take the question in a different angle, which is sales is turning on its head, and I think a lot of vendors are afraid to say this, which is, like people want to shy away from the AI is going to replace you conversation because it's scary, and they don't want to like selling to like a sales development leader. I'm like, hey, I'm going to cut your headcount in half, and they're like, well, that's where I like drive a lot of my ego. I don't necessarily want you to do that to me. But the reality is like the capacity that we can carry per seller within an organization is going to increase.
I think that's the story.
Yeah. I would say just to give you to the point of like what gets probably displaced in our tech stack, if I'm kind of reading the question, or what's going to get the most disrupted. Narrow point solutions that are process oriented. And that is not me throwing shade at any of those companies. They're very valuable. But if you think of how you couple AI with automation, that's what a lot of those narrow point solutions are probably solving for. And they have their space, don't get me wrong. Sometimes if data is gold, and I can't believe I just reframed Matthew McConaughey's crappy Salesforce commercial from a long time ago. But it truly is. If that small point solution vendor is providing wildly insightful data, I would imagine they are a little bit more bulletproof than some of the ones that are just moving data from point A to point B and helping you make the process tighter. That is probably the biggest risk that most vendors are going to run into from a tech stack perspective.
This is an extremely challenging step, so I'll take this with the grain of salt that you got to be at a certain point as an organization to get to this point. But like, if you can quantify that seller uplift in dollars and cents and start putting real, proper business cases in front of CROs, CEOs, and boards, that's where you start saying, okay, we're going to write, 7 or 8 figure checks into solving these, because it becomes a calculate, like they're going to question it, right? Because the numbers are going to look insane, because this stuff is insane, and the potential impact on how it's going to flow into business. But y'all have a position now to be able to actually get to the source data and say, okay, if we can produce 3x with the same number of reps, like, what does that actually mean for our businesses, right? Like fundamentally, that's enormous value creation if you're a private equity backed firm or whatever. Right?
We had one.
I think
Did
the
you-
yeah.
So it's quite an interesting thing what you're saying. We had an offsite, our strategy and ops team 2 weeks ago. One of the outputs of that, we agreed that we saw huge potential in actually stripping back a lot of the things we're asking our sales teams to put in the system. So I think this is where the disruption will happen to CRM. We still need a CRM, but we've decided we're going to stop asking the reps to start filling all these things. Our view is we can probably calculate with better accuracy the MedPIC scores, all the things from the conversational intelligence, the email stuff. We do it in forecasting, and our forecasting solution, Boost Up, uses AI to predict things. And it's got to the point where they say it's going to slip. It's 97% accurate, which is almost as good as me and way better than our sales managers. But we're going to kill all the governance stuff that we're doing manually. And the goal over the next 6 months is, can we just get a really high-speed, low-drag sales force for the rep so that they can just go and focus on selling, focus on applying the different techniques you're talking about, engaging with the customers, and things get populated around them automatically. And then they tweak, they can adjust, the managers have a say. That's our 6-month vision for that, while we're working on the bigger picture things and the cool stuff we want to do. Because we think out of box, there's enough things we can do with stuff we've got, or some of the new things in Salesforce, or lower cost vendors with minimal effort. That will destroy a lot of things that could make salespeople less productive.
All right, I have one closing question for you all, because I think we're a couple minutes past already. I'm pretty sure we have lunch in the other room, so you have to be succinct. What's one resource you would advise the group to look at? Something to keep abreast of what's going on in this space. And imagine we're all go-to-market people, and we're at varying degrees of expertise in terms of the technical aspects of it. But what should we be reading or listening to or watching or following on LinkedIn in order to really understand and keep up with the pace of change in this space?
Man, it'd almost be easier to answer that question in the inverse, like what not to listen to or what not to watch.
Give us your number one. If you could only recommend one thing, what would it be?
Yeah, philosophically, I would challenge anybody, if you're following a person, a company, or anything in between, tell them to prove it. It's really easy, and they should be able to prove what their AI is doing in practice. If you can't, I would be looking at that as the biggest, and it's not even beige, it is wildly red flag. If they can't prove it, of why it's working and get a live example, do it. This is an easy one. Follow Philip Lakin on LinkedIn. Yes, he works for Zapier. One thing he does every single day, and I can't make this up, we're missing it, we missed it today. 11 to 12, from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. every day, he goes on LinkedIn Live and builds something within Zapier that's agentic. And half the time it's like feedback from somebody in the post, like, what do y'all want me to build today? But when we say prove it in action. The other two things, and this isn't necessarily a resource, but I would highly encourage, just write these 2 words down, and it's in a linear pattern: deterministic to inference. And this is a scale, and if you just Google it, it's gonna come back with a cool AI prompt too, or its own flavor of it. But if you Google deterministic, inference, AI, and this is a spectrum, and a lot of people are stuck here. The spectrum, I'll show you the fun little graph in a second whenever we go to lunch. But people get stuck in this top-down mandate. Where do I go? How do I build this thing? Or how am I supposed to be agentic? And they don't know where on this spectrum they're trying to solve things. Deterministic, if this, then that. Very tight barriers. Inference, I'm going to fully rely on AI to give me the answer, and I'm going to trust it. I don't have enough time to talk about trust, but.
Trust is literally the core topic of every product meeting I have.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, my top source is literally talking to other founders. So, like, I've got actually RevOps leaders at one that comes to mind, RevOps leader at big HR tech company. He texts me at least once a month being like, what's new? Just like, what are you seeing? I think about it and I'm like, oh, I do the exact same thing with other AI-oriented founders where I'm just like, what are you working on? What's interesting? What challenges are you running into? The whole point of competitor or whatever, I try to be friendly with the folks in our space because we're all dealing with a really hard problem. And so it's like, what are you seeing? Oh, that's interesting. Cool, me too. We obviously keep the trade secrets out of the combo, but I think getting close to the source of truth, right? It's like, who do I follow on Twitter? It's like, I try to get as close as possible, either to folks building with AI or folks working at those companies that are talking about AI. That's, I think, the best and fastest way to learn things. Yeah.
The two pieces, there's a guy named Andrew Tan who writes the largest AI newsletter in the world. It comes out every day. Get on that. It's 800. There's only 800,000 people on it, but it's the largest one. And then the second is community. So doing stuff like this is really going to be the only real way of figuring this stuff out, right?
True.
It's moving so quickly that you've got to be close to it. So whether that's a dinner club, whether that's joining communities like Wizards of Ops, he didn't mention it, but Brad started that community.
Started that a long time ago too.
Or engaging with your peer networks in environments like this. There's no real other way, to stay abreast of this.
It was great. I think it's perfect timing as the downstairs group is coming up too. So Will, Brad, Seamus, thanks so much, and I'm sure the group's going to have follow-ups. It was great.
Thank you. Thanks.